So they can try.
There's a lot of other legislation that will be coming forward. I'm really excited. This last session was such an amazing session. It really was the best session that I have ever seen. The most conservative session with the most amazing stuff. And, you know, we're still riding on Trump's coattails. And so I think there's going to be some other really awesome things that are going to be happening in our state on a wide array of topics. So I look forward to that. And that's why we need people like Steve to be able to stay in the legislature with us, because we need his kind of caliber, his character and his qualifications to be able to help us.
Teachers unions they're not going to win most races because, you know, Idaho's very conservative, but the teachers unions have declared on their website, on the Idaho Education Association, they don't just hate school choice, they hate conservative wins. You know, on the teachers union website it says, I just read it yesterday, weirdly, I don't know why, but they actually said that this was the worst legislative session Idaho's ever had. So, you know, when you got the liberal teachers union saying that, it sounds like we're doing something right. What makes a nation a nation? Like, we're the nation of America and things like that. And I think it's, you know, to steal from one of my heroes, Michael Savage, who stole a lot of his views from Pat Buchanan, who's also a hero. I've read most of his books. I think the three things that make a nation are borders, language, and culture. If we let go of the rope, so to speak, with our borders, we already know what happens then. We've seen 4 years of Joe Biden, right? So, you know, I think borders matter. Borders matter. They make up a nation. Our shared language, that's a cohesive thing that binds us together. And, you know, we just passed a bill. It was Dale Hawkins and myself to put a question on the ballot in Idaho to amend the Constitution to make English the official language of Idaho. And some people freak out over that, but I mean, nobody freaks out that French people speak French, you know? It's not weird to go to Mexico and see people speaking Spanish. Like, language matters. It binds people together as a nation. And if we let that slip, we're letting part of our national identity slip as well. And then the last one is culture. It's like, why we do what we do and how we do it and why we do it. You know, traditional family values, law and order, individual liberties, freedom of religion. Like, America's a very unique place. So Steve is the type of guy, you know, that borders, language, and culture, that stuff really gets me going, and I'll die on those hills all day long. And Steve is a guy who gets all of that stuff. You know, Steve replaced, the guy Steve beat was more on, you know, left of center, where Steve is right over there with me, a right-wing extremist, which, you know, means he's just a regular conservative these days. There is a religious war going on in this country. It is a cultural war as critical to the kind of nation we shall be as the Cold War itself. For this war is for the very soul of America. And that's what he said in 1992. And I mean, ever since then, you know, we've seen things escalating and escalating and escalating. And I think our nation had a big turning point under Obama. You know, he said he wanted to get elected to fundamentally transform the United States of America, and he sure as hell did that. So we've, you know, I think we got to be all in on this stuff. You know, the left has declared a spiritual civil war, and it's time for conservatives to run to the sounds of the guns. I think it's important to name your enemy, right? If you're in some kind of spiritual civil war, culture war, well, if you're in a war, you kind of got to know who you're fighting against, you know? And I think for us, for myself, if there's any liberals in here, you're not going to be excited about this, but I doubt liberals would be at a fundraiser for Steve. Or anarchists, or maybe if you're libertarian, you might not be happy with some of this. But I look at who we're fighting, and it's the Democrats. That's enemy number one, I think. I know, because they are. The Democrats are the ones doing these things. They're the ones wanting to cut kids' genitals off. They're the ones wanting to mix up genders. They're the ones who We saw Biden, right? They're the ones who kept the damn border open for 4 years. We had that protest today. Have you guys seen that No Kings Day thing? So I think you have Democrats are kind of top of the pile. I think you have leftists, and there's a lot of crossover. You can be a Democrat and a leftist, but some of them don't identify with party. These are like Antifa, crazy, whack job anarchists who want to burn the country down. And I know some Democrats, and I'm sure all of you do too, who are still sensible. They still have kind of like common sense and they're normal. And then you have leftists who are just off the reservation. I think probably a very subversive opponent we face would be some of the hardcore libertarians, because libertarians don't believe in borders, language, or culture. They think we should have open borders, language, culture, those things don't matter. They believe we should legalize all drugs, legal prostitution, those types of things. And that's a very subversive kind of opponent to have, because they throw around words like liberty and freedom. So conservatives go, oh, we're on the same team, liberty, freedom. But when you really start digging in, I'm talking like the go to the convention libertarians, the Libertarian Party. I mean, it's a very subversive enemy to have, because there is no culture war to them, because they don't care about the culture. All they care about is freedom, 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 liberty, liberty, liberty. And then you can look at California, Portland, Seattle, Chicago, Philadelphia, all these blue city cesspools, and you can see what just letting people do whatever they want turns into. So there is a culture war, there is a spiritual war, but it's one I think we can win. And as long as we keep good men and women in office who are going to be fighting for these things, these kind of America First principles and things, that's how we keep Idaho right where it's at.
Getting in the way that I got elected last time around is, you may or may not know, but it was a pretty interesting race. It was a contentious 3-person race. Myself, another conservative, and then the incumbent, and I won. It's like, I had trouble like raising money last time, because you're ready to look at, it's a 3-way race and you're running against an incumbent. That's not going to happen, right? But it did happen. It happened by the grace of God. This was totally a God thing. I ran as a Christian conservative, and that's the mantle that I walk under. By the grace of God, I am here today. So I'm running again under that same banner. Brian mentioned, kind of a distinction that I think that something that a lot of people are not recognizing and having trouble separating in our party here in Idaho. That distinction between being a conservative, a Christian conservative, and a libertarian. And so we, not that we want to alienate anybody, but that is something, to recognize, something that's developing among us. But so, I was really privileged to get elected in with a great class of conservative legislators. There's a freshman. I think there was like 14, I think we had in the House, 14 freshmen, and most of them were conservative. And because of that, we had a majority. We were able to get a lot of things passed that in prior years, and a lot of it was, there was a roadblock. Speaker Moyle came in, he removed that roadblock, and we were able to get a lot of things through. We got the Health Freedom Bill, that came through. That's a big one. We got school choice, which Brian brought up, and we're getting a lot of heat about that. The teachers unions are coming against us. They're announced already. They're going to put money behind candidates against us because they are so angry that taxpayers could get a credit, a total lump sum, if you use $50 million, because that takes away from their $3.8 billion, that they get to run the public school system. But I believe the competition makes both better. I want public schools to be good. I want them to be great. But I believe the competition will get us there too. So it's a good thing that happened. But we also got through income tax reduction. That was actually, I think, originated with Speaker Moyle. We got DEI out of colleges and universities. I think probably we'll be thinking about enforcement, how to enforce it and how to enforce that next time around. Yeah, so we got a lot of things done. We got a lot of work done, but we have a lot more to do. So one thing I would really like to see done is where homeowners, seniors don't have to worry about losing their homes because they can't pay their property tax, the rising property tax. That's an issue. There's all kinds of things we do. We need to put more guardrails around Medicaid expansion, because that's very, very costly. There's a lot of things that we need to do still in the legislature. And I think Tammy was saying, or Brian was saying, that we're still riding on the coattail of Trump's, Trump being in office. And we still have some room to work on that. So I'm anticipating that we'll see that kind of work come through the next legislative session again. I was very fortunate as a freshman to get a few bills through, and which was really, really an amazing process. One was just a cleanup bill for election law having to do with the recall, the size of the city, having certain procedures for recall. And another bill that I worked on that kind of cleaned up code about how to proceed in elections, and actually Clerk Hogaboom, he helped me a lot on that, and I got to know and work with all the clerks in Idaho, and they're very helpful in that. Another bill that I was able to get through, I worked co-sponsored with Representative Jeff Cornelis of Nampa, and that was we were extending the meaning of public indecency. And the reason for that was because we felt like the indecency statutes needed more definition, because for men who had augmented breasts, we didn't want them taking off their clothes in public. So, we actually had to write a bill or extend that definition, do that. But all three of those went through, and the governor signed those into law. So I was very, very fortunate and blessed to be able to work on those. We have so many issues in front of us presently, but also I think we need to look over the horizon a little bit. I want to tell you about a story. I was camping. Kathy and I were camping out at CJ Strike one time, and we were with some friends. It was a day very much like today, just a beautiful, calm day, and we were talking to some friends of ours, and this guy bounded out of the trailer. He says, I just got a weather report that there's a storm that's going to come through, like a gale that's going to come through. And we looked around, it was like, there's not a cloud in the sky. The only cloud I could see was like over the mountain, just way far away. It was just a little bit of a cloud coming up. And within 45 minutes, it was a full-blown gale. Things seem stable until they're not. And I think we're on the verge in our culture. We're in a culture war. That's why I asked Brian and I asked Tammy to be here tonight, because they articulated that. They know that. Just like that storm, that wisp of a cloud that's out there right now, I feel like, we're looking at that, that issue of illegal immigration. And I think we'll see a lot of legislation, a lot of bills coming through this next term in regard to this issue.
On votes like that.